Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Rangers Review morning briefing for Tuesday, the 28th of May. I'm Derek Clark, and I'm joined this morning by Joshua Barry. How's it going, Joshua?
Yeah, going not bad, Derek. Already starting to look at the next few weeks and lamenting the lack of football, but we're going to try and talk around it anyway.
Yeah, we absolutely are. Still plenty of Rangers talking points to get stuck into. Before we do that, just a quick word for our podcast sponsor. As I mentioned yesterday, they've got a brand new kitchen showroom opening in Dunfermline. They've got a VIP Vegas themed launch weekend from June 14th to June 16th, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. I'm told there'll be roulette games with instant win prizes like 10% off services, free boiler services, and a chance to enter a draw for bigger prizes. If you land on zero, you get entered into a grand draw for a 4-night stay at Trump Tower in Vegas with a helicopter tour. The all-important links are in the description below to secure your spot. Right, let's get stuck in. Well, we've not spoke to you, Joshua, since what unfolded at Hampden on Saturday. What was your takeaways from the game?
Yeah, I know you guys have covered it extensively, and I know people watching will be absolutely sick of hearing about the game, so I'll maybe keep it brief. I think, Derek, it felt different to some recent Old Firm games to me in that it was pretty even on the basis of play, especially that second half. I think Rangers became the stronger team. I'm sure you've covered the decision to disallow that goal at length. If that goes in at that point, I think there's one team who are pretty clearly in the ascendancy. I wrote about after the game what Clement referenced in his post-match press conference, and I think the real difference that probably won the game for Celtic compared to Rangers, they travelled there, I think, without any injuries. Rangers still were missing 7 first-team members. When Abdallah Sima and Rabbi Matondo come off the bench, Matondo hasn't played since, I believe, the semi-final win over Hearts. Sima has about 300 minutes of football since January. And I thought they didn't look sharp in those key moments. If you compare, there was a 3v3 transition moment that Rangers had in the 85th, 86th minute, and obviously Celtic went and scored with their own kind of 5v5 moment a few minutes later. And if you watch Sima's run, it's included on the piece on the website, it's maybe just that lack of understanding, the fact that he hasn't played much with Nico Raskin, for example, the fact that the ball then ends up ahead of Liam Scales instead of Sima running behind into space. These small details, I think, just worked against Rangers in the end. But the cause of that is not just coincidental. And again, we've covered it extensively over the last few weeks. We're going to cover it extensively over the summer. It's only when you give yourself the best chance to win a trophy like this over the long haul, much like the league. I think the better resource team in the end won out. So a frustrating day for Rangers supporters at Hampden, a frustrating day, I'm sure, for Clement, because he will feel like his team was well set up, and again, it was just relying on someone to go and take that moment. But that's the big thing that stood out to me. Celtic can make like-for-like replacements. Their squad's been fully fit at the end of the season. They could bring on someone in Adam Ida, a like-for-like replacement up top. In contrast, Sima's only played a handful of minutes since his most recent injury. Rangers were not bringing on like-for-like replacements in a number of positions, even if you look at Scott Wright losing the ball cheaply in the lead up to Celtic's goal. And I think that is ultimately what pushed the margins in Celtic's favour to win the trophy, and that is what Clement and co have to change this summer. They need to be able to build a squad that can go the distance, because otherwise you'll be back in the same situation.
Yep, absolutely. And still gutted over the weekend, I've got to admit. Interestingly, we'll touch on this before we go into detail on Chris's great piece on the website this morning. I urge you to check it out. The link is in the description below. Ali McCoist has been on Talk Sport this morning, I think it was. He's launched a scathing rant on the refereeing standards in Scotland, and he slaughtered Nick Walsh over his scandalous decision in the Scottish Cup final, of course, on Saturday. He's called the officiating ridiculous. He was responding to a text from a Celtic supporting listener who jokingly shared an unlucky message with McCoist on the radio station. McCoist says we were unlucky. He has got a point there, Jeff. Scandalous. Talking to Jeff Stelling, absolutely scandalous, honestly. But I have come to expect it. The incompetence of our officials is nothing short of ridiculous. It is bordering on embarrassing, to tell you the truth. They disallowed the goal for a shove. Okay, there might have been a little shove. I can understand that. But then go back 2 seconds. They have got to give a penalty. The boy has got his arms wrapped around the guy who eventually does a little shove. It is just total incompetence, Jeff, but we have come to expect it, and that's the way it goes. Well said from Ali McCoist on national radio this morning. We talked about it at great length yesterday, Joshua, but what do you make of McCoist's comments and the overall standard of refereeing?
He was not holding back, is he? I mean, I think the presiding frustration, Derek, is that, do you know what it kind of reminded me of a little bit? It reminded me of the, remember the Katic header, the penalty that Katic conceded at Parkhead, where it's a little bit like, now I'll just disclaim out the way that I think I agree the referee standard is generally poor. Overall statements that I know you probably agree with, that you need full-time referees in games of this magnitude. I also think that the referees are doing an honest job, and I agree with what Clement said a couple of months ago when he was asked on that topic. But he criticised Nick Walsh for the kind of contrast in decisions, and that probably tells you, I think that gives you quite a good gauge, because Clement is not someone to really come out and criticise the officiating if it's not necessary. I just think with these decisions, when you give one in the box, you end up probably giving a lot. And if you look at the goal, again, the frustrating thing from a Rangers point of view, look, Raskin does have his hands on Joe Hart's back, there's no question, but the frustration will be obviously that if he doesn't make that push, the ball probably still gets over to Sima at the back post. And then also, as Clement mentioned, if you look at the kind of grappling that just goes on all the time in the penalty box at the front post, that in contrast to the foul is probably more severe, but that is something that goes on at every single corner, and that's why these rules can sometimes lead to these frustrating decisions. So that is my thought on the matter. Not quite as abrasive as Ali McCoist, but he's in a better position to comment than me.
Yeah, well said, Ali. Right, let's move on to Chris's piece on the website. Of course, we are expecting a bit of a cull to the Rangers squad this summer, and there will be players brought in. Hefty has already arrived. We are expecting Jose Cordoba to join him and many others. Now, Chris has went through the Rangers squad as it stands at this moment in time, and had a look at whether they're likely to remain Rangers players next season or move on. We'll run through it, Joshua. He starts with the goalkeepers. Jack Butland, the first name that pops up. His contract expires 2027. He is a talking point, of course, because he is a player at the club with realistically the highest valuation. And I think I've said it before, if an offer comes in, I think upwards of £12+ million, the Rangers board are going to have to look at it. And what's your inclination on Jack Butland? Do you think he's still Rangers number one next season, or do you think Rangers will be looking for a replacement?
And realistically, it probably depends on that offer, Derek, because as you say, he's a player that Rangers supporters won't want to lose. The goalkeeping position, all clubs have, I guess, special relationships with different positions on the park. At Rangers, the goalkeeping position is very much one of those, but they are still also a club who needs to fix their recruitment in terms of players coming in, but also in terms of players going out to facilitate that if they're going to grow beyond the cycle that we've seen over the last few seasons. So it depends on the money that comes in for him. He's a player that you've brought in on, obviously substantial wages, but you've not paid a transfer fee for. If you were to get an offer, it would obviously have to be upwards north of £10 million or 12 million, as you're suggesting. Then that's going to be hard to probably turn down when Rangers do need money to reinvest in their rebuild. So I think it depends. Obviously, alongside probably everyone else, I'd like to see Jack Butland play for Rangers next season, because he's kept them in a lot of this season, and if you put a stronger team around him, then I think you'd see his performances improve as well. But ultimately, there is going to be a price on his head, as there is with every other player in the squad, because Rangers unfortunately aren't in a position where they can turn down a lot of money for even if they're key individuals.
Yeah, I get a few comments coming in saying Rangers should be demanding more. Stephen Gillespie with the point offer's got to be over 20 million. If Butland is worth that now, he's still worth that next season. I get your point, Stephen. I just think if a mega money offer comes in, then the Rangers board will be looking at it. They've got a major rebuilding job on their hands this summer. So, it's one to keep an eye on. Robbie McCrory is next up. Expect him to leave, Joshua. He should have left. I know the manager wanted to keep him around, and I get that, but it's cost him his Scotland place at the Euros in the summer. He'll be departing, I'd imagine, will he not?
Yeah, I would imagine so. Obviously, it's been a long wait for him to try and get those match minutes. He got them towards the end of last season under Michael Beale for, 5 games. He's only played once this season. I think Butland has only missed one game, hasn't he? So we'd expect him to go and seek first-team football elsewhere. I believe there was a possibility of that in January, but he's at an age now where we've joked before that Robbie McCrorie, he's been called a young player up until now. He's, 25, 26. He's still in goalkeeping terms. He's still got 14, 15 years ahead of him potentially in his career. But you'd imagine, and it sounds like he's going to be one that goes and seeks first team football next season. Obviously, that corroborates with what Chris was reporting last week in relation to Liam Kelly perhaps coming in the other way as well, and would expect McCrorie to go and seek first team football.
Yep, John McLaughlin will leave as well. Moving on to the defenders. First up, James Tavernier. Now, he was a big. We discussed him on the Rangers Review Extra Q&A show yesterday. I think me and Chris discussed it as a future as well on the morning briefing yesterday, and that's a big call for the manager. Now, it's determined on a club coming in and bidding for the Rangers captain. We all know the Saudi links won't go away. If an offer would come in for Tavernier, I'm not entirely sure what sort of fee Rangers should be commanding for the skipper, who is 32 years of age now. But that is a big call, not only whether he stays at Rangers, Joshua, but whether Rangers need a change in the captaincy as well next season. What's your gut feeling on it?
Obviously, he's been quizzed a lot on it over the last few weeks, hasn't he? These Saudi links aren't new. He's got 2 years left on his current deal. I think a lot of the mood around Tavernier has changed over the last couple of months, 3 months, because he's had a really bad 2 to 3 months up until March. I don't think that was the case up until, even if you cash him back to that Hibs game where he became the highest scoring defender, I think, on that day, scored that volley. Since then, things have started to gradually fall apart for Rangers. I think they're in a place now, I think you're in a place now realistically, where you might have to move on at the right time because Tavernier is not getting younger. We've seen his defensive performances, I think, over the last 2 months. That's always been something that's been held against him, perhaps not always fairly. And I think I'm someone who would probably defend him more than most, not least because of his contribution at the other end. Thought he really struggled up against Dyson Maeda at the weekend. Diamande in that first half probably won more tackles up against the Celtic winger than Tavernier did. And obviously he's played a lot of football, not dissimilar to Connor Goldson as well. He's played a lot of football in the last 3, 4, 5, 6 seasons, and sometimes that shows. I think it obviously depends on what the interest is and whether an offer comes in, Derek, because he does still have 2 years on his deal, current deal as well, and he's not going to go if the obviously correct offer doesn't come in for him. But I think the last couple of months have probably shown that there is, there's substance behind the argument that is it the right time to part ways if the relevant offer were to come in. And I think around Christmas time, I don't know if that argument was in the exact same place.
Yeah, I think him and Goldson fall into the same bracket for me. I think it is perhaps time for a changing of the guard and a reformation of the leadership group. I think it's no player is bigger than the club, of course. James Tavernier has been a fantastic servant, but I think now it's maybe time to go down a different avenue. Adam Devine is on that list, of course, spent the second half on loan at Motherwell. He's entering the final year of his deal. I haven't seen much of him for the Steelmen this season. I think he has performed reasonably well. I'm thinking if Tav goes, Joshua, Dujon Sterling would be the natural replacement at right back. The Rangers bringing someone else at right back if that materialises, or is he in the building already? Can Adam Devine fill that role as he was doing, I guess, beforehand in deputising?
Well, the important thing to stress probably in this overall conversation is Rangers are not rebuilding from a brilliant point of view. Do you know what I mean? It's not as if they are. I know that the whole Gerrard fix the roof while the sun is shining comment has come up a lot in the last few weeks. But as Clement said when he was asked afterwards at Hampden, how much of a challenge is this? He said it's a massive challenge to rebuild in this short a space of time. Normally it's over a number of windows that you want to, I guess, refresh a squad, or normally you want to I guess, keep that moving along so there's not this fork in the road where a number of players have to go and a number of players have to come in at the same time, because it's logistically, it's difficult. And what comes into that is there's going to have to be areas where Rangers prioritise. Do you know what I mean? There might be a player in one position who presents a really good opportunity. Obviously, in the January window, the big thing that kept coming up is why have Rangers not prioritising an out-and-out number 9, an out-and-out goal scorer? When you're not building from a brilliant and ideal situation, then that is going to mean you're going to have to compensate in specific areas. And if you listen to what Clement had to say after the Dundee game, when he was speaking about young players coming in and playing more of a part, and that being a necessity for Rangers to become the kind of buying and selling club which they should be, then you'd expect the likes of Devine and others, Robbie Fraser, John Leafeco, Cole McKinnon, all the others that have been in and around it. Obviously, Ross McCausland is now very much a first-team player to play a part at some point over the next season and play a bigger part in the squad. Dujon Sterling, I think he sees his role in his best position in central midfield going forward. So it'll be interesting to see, obviously, what the moving parts are there this summer. But I like that as well. I think you want to make Sterling someone that you build around rather than someone that you just fit in at some place in the team. And we've definitely seen enough from him this season to suggest that, you know, he could play in that role going forward. He would probably benefit over the course of the season from not having to be a utility man in every position that Rangers need as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Touched on there, Connor Goldson, for me, falls into the tab bracket. It's time to move on. John Souttar, I would keep around. He's got 2 years left on his deal. Ben Davies also has 2 years left on his deal. And I thought he and Leon Balogun performed well at the back for Rangers in the Cup final on Saturday. Davies, wouldn't be surprised to see him depart. Leon Balogun, an interesting one, signing that year's extension, Joshua. Now, that's a talking point. I've seen on social media yesterday many supporters not too happy with that decision to offer him a new deal. I'm quite happy with the out-of-contract players, Balogun getting a year's extension. I think he's a good influence in and around the place. He's an experienced head. He can still perform. He's not going to be the first choice centre back, but whenever he's called upon, you can pretty much rely on him. What's your feeling on that?
Well, I agree with you that Davies, I thought he was good in the Cup final, and generally I think he's not had many games in a Rangers shirt where he's been really below par. He's lacked physicality at some points in Scottish football, maybe to properly dominate. But as Ali says there, Cordoba playing on that left side of defence would probably show you who the first choice is going to be in that position. The Balogun one sums up this whole conversation for me, Derek, because you had him leave this time 2 years ago, and this kind of sums up Rangers squad building issue and what they need to fix. So you go from Gerrard to Gio, contrasting playing styles, and that lines up somewhat with the decision to let Leon Balogun go. Also lines up with the fact that at that moment in time, Rangers were really prioritising Leon King. He played the most minutes of any young player in the Champions League. I think it was under 20 in the following campaign. How can it be that 2 seasons on, it's Balogun who's starting in the Cup final? He's going to, it looks like, be offered a new deal, and Leon King is really out of the picture in terms of minutes that he has played this season. That is the overall issue from Rangers, jumping from manager to manager, style to style, not having an overarching sporting structure that stops these decisions from becoming a real issue. Because what most other football clubs would have done in that situation is they'd have made the right decision on someone like Leon King. Is he going to be a player who, under different managers, can start in a cup final a couple of years down the line? As it has turned out, Rangers went back to sign Leon Balogun last summer. This isn't a criticism of him, because I agree with you. I think he's very dependable and is clearly someone that a manager likes to have around the dressing room. But how can it be that you've made that decision 2 years ago as an organisation, and then we're going to be in a position 3 years on, not only 2 years on when he starts in the cup final last weekend, 2 or 3 years on, where that young player that you freed up the position for, and that's what the noise is about Balogun being let go at the time, we're all about allowing Leon King to come in and play match minutes, allowing him to step up into that centre-back role. How can it be that then that's still not materialised and you've re-signed a player a couple of seasons on? That sums up Rangers squad building issue for me, and the type of contrasting decision-making that if they don't get that right this summer, moving forward, they're going to be in the same position, because it doesn't speak to a cohesive strategy over a number of seasons, and because I don't think on a squad building point of view there has been.
Yep, there's a couple of comments coming in. One that I wanted to address, Blue to White says, "Are you Adam Devine's father, Derek?" No, I can confirm I am not as much as I'm aware, I'm not his dad, buddy, but I can see the resemblance. And let's move on to the other players in the defensive department. Leon King is get 2 years on his deal remaining. He has come in at the tail end of last season, played a few games, wasn't entirely convincing, perhaps understandable given he hasn't played much football. That's one for me. You don't simply just get rid of Leon King. He'll be kept at Rangers unless an offer will be coming in for him. Borna Barisic is leaving. Ridvan Yilmaz is a conundrum for me. Good player. I do like him. I'm surprised he actually lasted the whole game on Saturday. And fair play to him. He's one of those players. Great when he's on form and he's full of confidence and he's fit. Unfortunately, like many players in the Rangers squad, he has spent too much time off the pitch injured. I imagine there'll be clubs interested in him in the summertime. He falls in the bracket as the likes of Tavernier for me. If an offer was to come in, an attractive offer, then the Rangers board should look at it. For me, I know that Hefty has come in the door. He'll be looking for that starting spot at left back, and Robbie Fraser is the other defender who is out of contract in the summertime, but I think it would be a wise move to keep him going forward. Joshua, what's your views on the left back situation?
Everyone knows I absolutely love watching Ridvan because he's just a good player, isn't he? But the question is, can he stay fit? And the normal answer to that has been no over the last couple of seasons. We've got a scout report coming on Hefty tomorrow. He looks like a really exciting player to me. He carries the ball like a winger, strong, pretty physical, ball carrier over distance. We'll speak about it in the piece and we'll do a video on it as well, Derek. But I think you can see how he will fit into what Clement is trying to do, and he also fits the bracket of being a young player, someone who's went away and played a good season of football with hopefully selling value down the line. The Mohamed Diamande example is what Rangers need as much as possible going forward, being someone who can impact things now. And I thought Diamande was probably Rangers' best player at the weekend in central midfield, but also really improve and have that sell on value down the line. If you could therefore play him as your first choice and have Ridvan bring in a little bit more than you spent on him a couple of seasons ago, you've got Robbie Fraser there as a potential backup. Again, these are the type of decisions Rangers are probably going to have to make because they're not building from an ideal situation. And I think it's unlikely that Clement wants to rotate minutes between Ridvan and Hefty, for example. He'll want a first choice back four and he'll want dependable players who can, as he's already said, play games every 3 days at the intensity that his football requires.
Yeah. Let's move on to the midfielders then. Dujon Sterling, first up, a revelation this season. He's been a top drawer signing. He can play anywhere in that team and he'll do a job. And unless a big money offer was to come in, a groundbreaking bid from a team elsewhere, then I fully expect him to be at Ibrox next season. John Lundstrom's leaving, Ryan Jack's leaving, and then we go on to Nico Raskin and Mohamed Diamande. Diamande's loan ends, but Rangers have that obligation to buy, so they've already committed to paying the fee, around about £4.5 million to FC Northland to make it permanent. I think he's a good signing. Nico Raskin's an interesting one. Thought he was brilliant on Saturday, Joshua, and he and Diamande really liked that combination in midfield. He did tire, as did Diamande in that second half. Understandable, I guess, but Raskin's an interesting one. I think a couple of months ago, people were saying, well, he's not getting a look in. Maybe it's time to move him on. I'm not so sure now. If Rangers can get him fit and firing for next season, I think he can be a real asset, and Diamande will be a good player going forward. What's your views on that one?
Agree. I think I put out a piece after the last legal firm saying that Raskin should play in the next one, and divided opinion on Twitter, as these things tend to do, Derek. But the point was, he suits that type of game. I think there's question marks over him if he's playing in a kind of deep line midfield role at times against a low block. Does he have the patience sometimes to break teams down? Is he a little bit erratic on the ball? But he hadn't become a bad player overnight. Technically he can compete with the Celtic midfield, and he's got the legs to get around and snap into tackles as well. So I thought he had a really good game. And Diamande, probably his best game, I would argue, in a big game for Rangers so far, even if obviously he was on the losing side. It's his pass that loses the ball in the lead up to Celtic's winning goal, but it's the exact right pass to play. It's not his fault.
No.
The touch at the other end of it is a poor one. It's a pass that actually creates a 4-on-4 moment for Rangers in front of the Celtic defence. So if you've got Raskin, if you've got Diomande, if you've got Sterling in that central midfield position, that is an area where you've got three, I would argue, three really good young profiles. Probably still needs one more in there. That need for a long-term number 6, someone who is a natural dictator of play, someone who is going to try and prize open defences and always be the centre point of your team is something Rangers have lacked for a while. Will they play Mohamed Diomande there going forwards? I guess we'll have to wait and see, but I agree with you. I thought Raskin and Diomande were really good as a complement, and the first time we've really seen them in that kind of pairing at the weekend.
Yeah, before we move on, Ali Filatelli gets in touch, says, Joshua, I agree with you that Sterling's best position is midfield. However, how would he fit into a midfield with Raskin and Diomande, building a good partnership? How would you play? I know that Clement does like to play that number 10. Where would he fit, Joshua?
Don't know. I mean, obviously, we're speaking in so many hypotheticals because, again, Rangers, Clement said at the weekend that some decisions still have to be made about the squad, who stays, who goes, who they're going to try to get rid of, who they're going to try to keep. But then on top of that, you've got to predict what is going to happen in the transfer window and how does that impact the squad makeup for next season. I agree with you that Clement is probably going to stick with that 4-2-3-1 because largely that is what he's gone for so far. I just think that Sterling, you need to build around him, Derek, because he's played brilliantly, but he's played brilliantly while his roles changed every single week and his instructions changed every single week. I don't think he's your deep line midfielder when you're trying to break teams down and someone who's going to pass open a defence. Rangers still need that type of profile for me. But you probably can't have enough, or you can have enough. But to have 3 of those players for 2 positions, even over the course of a season, if Rangers are going to play 65 games, if you are talking about having 2 deeper midfielders behind one creative and then bringing in someone else who can play in that deeper role as well, I don't think that is a bad situation to have because Clement will need depth in the middle of the park.
Yeah, the other midfielders, Jose Cifuentes, well, he's on loan at Cruzeiro for, it was a year-long loan that he signed. I very much doubt we'll see him in the Rangers jersey again. Cole McKinnon's contract runs out next summer. He has looked good every time that he's been coming off the bench and appearing for Rangers. He'll be staying around. Kieran Dowell has got 2 years left on his deal. That's an interesting one. I think the Rangers just rip up his contract, pay him up and let him go, or does he feature in the squad next season? He's another one that has been plagued with injuries. And the other two to come to Todd Cantwell. I know he splits opinion amongst the fan base. Some would be happy for him to leave. Some would like him to stay. I'd be inclined to have him stay unless, again, a decent offer would be coming in for him. It's whether he fits into how Clement, what his style of play, what he wants to achieve at Rangers next season. And then Tom Lawrence, who's entering the final year of his deal. That, again, another one that's just spent too much time on the treatment table. Joshua, is it a case of with Dowell and Lawrence, you pay them up and let them go, or do these guys feature next season?
Just quickly on Sterling as well, I've seen a comment saying, have Rangers ever played him at right back? I think it depends on the role, because if he was an inverted right back, someone who moved in field, became an extra midfielder at points, but gave you that defensive cover on, there's no question he's Rangers' best one-on-one defender, and then gave you that defensive cover on the other side of the game as well. If Rangers had an out-and-out right winger ahead of him, then that is also an option. So just to cover that. But on the midfield situation, yeah, you're right. I mean, if you look at the minutes that Lawrence and Dowell have played in isolation, it's just not enough. Dowell had that injury that he suffered in the training camp after he played pretty well leading up to that, scored away against Motherwell, didn't he? Cantwell, you're right, he does split opinion. I thought he had a decent game on Saturday. I think the difficulty is with Cantwell for me, Derek, that he's a player who relies on other people to finish his moves. He's not someone who's going to score from 20 yards. I don't think he's a brilliant finisher from range. There was a few moments where he played nice balls into Dessers and the finish wasn't quite there, or shifted the ball out wide, and Rangers just lacked the wingers because they've not played without them for so long to try and finish off moves as well. There's no question that there's frustrations to what he brings to the table as well. He'll probably look at the season overall and think he's had 2 injuries, he's had 2 managers, the style has changed a lot. For me, there remains no question that he's a really good technical player, one of Rangers' best. I guess the question Clement will have to ask is he someone, Cantwell, that he can depend upon across the campaign, the whole campaign of a league season and a European season? And how much of those performances improve with better players around them? Because let's not forget, if Rangers had a fully fit complement, you'd have had the front four being Cantwell, Sima, Cortez, and Danilo. That is a totally different point of view compared to what we saw, compared to 2 players playing out of position in the front 3, and Cyril Dessers, who still scored 23 goals over the course of a league campaign, but was injured after 25 minutes, he said, and looked really tired. And it's no coincidence because of the amount of football that he has played since Danilo pulled up with that injury in December.
Yeah. Right, let's move on to the forwards then. Rabbi Matondo's first up. He's another one that's got 2 years left on his deal. Incidentally, Jim got in touch there. Our website tells you when contracts expire. Transfermarket.com, Jim. I'll give you the details on that. And right, so Rabbi Matondo came off the bench at the weekend. I thought he was positive, but yeah. He has his limitations, like many others. He's just been injured for much of his time at Rangers, and he's on a good deal at the club as well. I think if Rangers can find a buyer for him, then it will be time for a parting of the ways. Ross McCausland next up. He's got 3 years left on his deal. I think he's contributed this term. He's actually in form. Maybe consider himself perhaps unfortunate not to start the game at the weekend. I'd be keeping Ross around. It's been a real breakthrough season for him. Other than that, we've got Oscar Cortez. Of course, his loan ends at the end. Well, his loan has ended, but Rangers are in negotiations with Lons about making that extending either that loan or making the move permanent. I'm excited to see more of Cortez in a Rangers jersey. Well, just on those 3, we'll start off with Joshua. For me, I'd be trying to sell Matondo, keeping McCausland and keeping Cortez.
Matondo and McCausland could, I think, be your 2 backups in those positions. Matondo hasn't had a clean run of games. He's improved under Clement for me. He's still an impact substitute rather than a starter. He's had this persistent knee issue, which isn't new, that has hampered his season. But again, it's one of these situations where you cannot move 20 players out the door and bring 20 players in. So there's going to have to be areas where, as the comment is saying here, okay, maybe he is your substitute in the left wing behind a Cortez or in an ideal world a Sima. But again, there's that fitness question. If you've got 2 injury-prone players in that situation, in that position, then you're going to end up with the same situation as this season where you have no fit wingers to play. McCausland, far too inconsistent. I think that's harsh. He's got 10 goal involvements. If you look at his goal against
Hearts, talking about, sorry.
Matondo, sorry. Fair enough then. But McCausland, what was I saying? For me, McCausland has done well in his first season. You've got to remember that he was nowhere near the Rangers first team last season. Do I think he's your starting right winger in every single game next year? No, but he's someone who is a good presser of the ball. I think has better end quality than people give him credit for. He's positive, and the Hearts goal and the Dundee goal show that. There's questions about whether his quality is sufficient to make him a starter. But again, he's definitely going to be part of the squad next season, and he is someone that will, for me, take up that second role in the right wing where he's not starting week in, week out, but he will still play 30 games over the course of the season. Yeah.
The next group of players, we've got 2 players heading into the final year of their deals in Scott Wright and Alex Lowry. And the manager says he would assess Lowry in the summertime. He came back after that pretty disappointing loan spell at Hearts. He was sent back early, picked up a really bad injury. He came back into contention, was part of match day squads at the tail end of last season, but we haven't really seen anything of him. Scott Wright, I think Scott Wright needs to leave, but again, it's finding buyers for these players. He did have an opportunity in the summertime. That move fell through to Turkey. Rangers simply need better. Good on this player, but he's not the answer at this moment in time for Rangers, as what unfolded, as we touched on there, demand is passed to him in the Scottish Cup final. You can't miscontrol passes from 15 yards away in such high caliber games, and it cost Rangers at the weekend. Yanis Hadji is also up there. He spent the season on loan at Alaves. It's been a pretty much a roller coaster time for him in Spain. Spoke to a Romanian journalist recently when I was speaking about Albion Rahmani. I did ask him about Hadji. And they say that he did well against Real Madrid recently. I know that Alaves lost 5-0, but he was good at the Bernabeu. And they're expecting big things for him at the Euros. Those three are interesting, Joshua. I've not really seen anything of Alex Lowry recently to form an opinion. I would trust the manager's judgment on that one. Whether he maybe goes out on loan for the final year of his deal and moves on, who knows? Hadji, do you see him having a Rangers future?
Well, we've had this conversation before. We've had a lot of these conversations before because of the nature of the last few seasons. I've seen that his father, Georgie Hadji, was speaking out about his son Yanis definitely having a future under Philippe Clement. Is he someone that would perform better in that number 10 position? I don't know. I don't know if he'd suit the man-to-man pressing and the distances you have to cover in that system. Clement will be able to have a look at him alongside Lammers. He's someone that has value, and that is probably going to be important for Rangers over the course of the summer to reinvest into players that Clement and Coppin and others think have a long-term future at Ibrox. Lowry feels like it's maybe last chance to loan for him. Obviously had a difficult loan spell at Hearts last season and was on the bench away at Hearts, wasn't he? Or no, it was a home to Dundee, he was on the bench, but we haven't seen him for a while. So a lot of question marks around those types of players. I'll jump on to Lammers quickly. We're going to have a look at him later on. Just what has happened to him over the second half of the season. He's definitely someone who Rangers should, and I'm sure will now, be looking to sell for more than they brought in, because if they were going to go and buy someone from the Eredivisie who had scored whatever it is, 12 goals in the second half of the season, he would cost you more than the money that they paid to Atalanta last summer to bring him to Ibrox in the first place.
On Lammers, Rangers should be demanding top dollar for me, given what he's done over there in Holland. Abdallah Sima is next up, and it ties in with comments he's made after the game at the weekend. His loan is up with Brighton, and about the possibility of extending his stay at Ibrox. He says, "It's not up to me. I always say I feel at home here, and I'm happy to be here. I've always loved to give everything for this shirt. As I say, this place feels like home, and I feel everyone wants to stay in a place that feels like home. So you'll see in the next few weeks. I think I can be proud of my season and happy with what I've contributed. I wanted to do more, but of course I had a bad moment with my injury, which ruled me out for a long time. But I'm always looking forward, and I'm not looking back. I really wanted to win the cup for the club, for my teammates, and I think we deserve to do that, to be honest, but it wasn't enough. Then we need to look forward to next season." I would love Abdallah Sima to be part of the squad next season, Joshua. He really has contributed this season. He's quite right. That injury, we touched on the injuries this season to the forward line. His absence was massive. It really was.
Yeah, because he'd scored 15 goals by Christmas time, and then his replacement, Oscar Cortez, came in and was injured away at Rugby Park before February had finished. So that's a big turning point in the season for Rangers. If they can keep Abdallah Sima, I don't think there's any question that they would. Is a permanent deal likely? It feels unlikely purely because he's a 22-year-old international who scored at a pretty impressive rate on loan, and he's contracted to Brighton, who know how to navigate a transfer window, don't they? So, as Sima says, it's not always up to him, not always up to the player. His agent spoke relatively recently about Sima being very open to staying at Ibrox, one to keep an eye on over the summer, because it's one that, of course, Rangers would like to make happen. But again, it depends on the circumstance, the availability, and whether it's what Brighton see, because they'll have their own priorities. And if they can go and sell Sima for a lot more money, then I'm sure that will be a more appealing option. It might work in Rangers' favour that he's had injuries, because had he scored, say, 25 goals and played the second half of the season, I don't think there's much of a chance Rangers would have been able to keep him. Maybe because of how the season has played out, that gives him a little bit more opportunity.
Yeah. Fabio Silva next up. He's departed. His loan deal has ended. I think an ultimately disappointing spell at Rangers, all things considered. And then we've got Kemar Roofe, who's departed, who will depart. It will not be renewed. Danilo, again, we've not seen enough of him this season. It was really galling that he's missed such a large part of the campaign. And let's hope that we've seen a little have a little clip of him and Cortez working hard away in the gym. Let's hope they're robust enough to take on whatever's going to be thrown at them next turn. And then Cyril Dessers, which, like Cantwell, splits opinion, Joshua. Some would like to see Cyril move on. Some think he can still do a job for Rangers. There's no doubt about it, though. He cannot be the #1 striker heading into next season. I'm of the opinion I would keep him around if he's happy being a squad player, pretty much like Antonio Cholak last season. His numbers are decent. They could have been better. We all know his limitations, but would you be actively looking to move him on in the summer?
Again, depends on the offers that come in, because as you say, if you can keep him as a backup option, and he has scored a lot of goals over the course of the season, as you say, everyone knows his limitations. They've been somewhat more exposed because he's had to play every single minute. And again, he's been one of the only players in that front three that's been able to play in his normal position over the duration of the season. Danilo is someone who I really liked coming in last season. I'm looking at, I know he only played, 5-6 games. I know he missed a couple of chances. Every striker, sadly, does miss chances. Not just exclusive to Rangers strikers. When you've had an injury as severe as Danilo has, it's going to take you time to get back to full fitness. It's going to take you time to get back to the level of player that you were before. But there's a reason that Rangers were so pleased to get that signing done last summer, and that there was so much money was spent on Danilo in the first place. It's one area of the pitch where Rangers, if everyone is fit, if you had Sima, Cortez, etc., you are relatively well equipped. But again, you have to look at the overall injury picture, which has meant that Rangers have had effectively one number 9 for much of the season. Roof obviously wasn't even on the bench at Hampden last Saturday. So would I keep Dessers around next season? Probably as a number 2. The question is Danilo going to be ready to be your number 1 coming back after such a long injury? And where is your depth in that front line? There's no question that Rangers still need to add on top of that. Yeah. Even if Danilo and Dessers are both fit and stay throughout the duration of the season, and you'd imagine that Sell and Lammers will be a part of facilitating that and making sure there's more depth over the course of this season. Because again, to round up and go back to the point we made at the start, I think one of the key differences for Rangers at the weekend is they can't bring on a fully fit striker, and Celtic can. It's these small margins that have made the difference in April and May in particular. And Clement needs to build a squad that come April and May in 2025, they're well resourced enough to go the full duration and obviously win these games and win these titles late on.
Yep. A few comments come in. We'll address them here. King Charles Spaniel says, what is Dessers' injury? It's an ankle injury picked up from the tackle from Carter Vickers at the weekend, buddy. Not too sure that how long he'll be out for. The comment come in there. No update on that as yet. And Alan just on Danilo says, jury's out on Danilo. I agree with you, Alan. He did miss a few big opportunities himself. I'm not entirely convinced he is the man that Rangers fans should be hanging their hat on to get upwards of 20 plus goals next season either. I've said it before, I think Rangers need 2 strikers in the door in the winter window, in the summer window. So one to keep an eye on for sure. Now you can read what Chris's views are on the entire squad over on the website. Do go and check the piece out, folks. The link is in the description below. For those of you that are Rangers Review Extra members, I was on yesterday for a bumper Q&A show, loads of questions to get through. Me and Joshua will be on tomorrow for an interesting video on Hefty. Very much looking forward to seeing him in a Rangers jersey, Joshua.
Yeah, I've watched a fair bit of him and lots of exciting details, I think, to the type of player that Rangers have signed. So we'll look through some of his data, some of the questions around him. What type of player is he? How could he fit in? There'll be gifts, etc., etc. So yeah, hopefully people enjoy that. There'll be a piece on the website as well, and that this will be over the course of the whole summer. Not only will we bring you insight into how the transfers come about and the news leading up to the deal, but also real insight into what type of player said player is and how they might fit into Philippe Clement's system going forward. So looking forward to chatting about Hefty tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, folks, that'll do us here. Thank you to each and every one of you for tuning in as ever. We'll speak to you again tomorrow. Until then, enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. Bye for now.